Hi, long range hunting. Now, long range hunting, is this a new fad? Is this something new that the industry has just been pushing for the last few years and trying to get people in and trying to sell them on they can just grab a rifle and go shoot? But the truth is that in reality, it's just an industry thing to make money, that traditional hunting wasn't done long range, that it goes against ethics of hunting, that it wasn't done traditionally, that a traditional hunter gets close, and that this whole thing is just something that guys want to play sniper with and it's completely new? Let's dive in and find out. Now, anybody that knows me or follows me knows that I just care about facts. That's it. I don't care about opinions. I don't care about, nonsense or anything. Guys like to think just because they believe something or they heard something that's realistic. I prefer to stick to provable facts. And so let's explore this topic because it's something I see on a daily basis as a long-range hunter. I see all these different claims that it's not what traditional hunting is, that it's new, the industry, blah, 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 blah. Well, is there any truth to that? Let's actually look at the history of long-range hunting. Now, this is going to be a little bit more interactive. I'm going to ask some questions. So for this first one, I want you guys to pause, drop a comment below of what you think, and let's see if you're correct. How long has long-range hunting been around? Now, I'm going to check out your guys' answers, but the actual answer is 150 years. Now you might go, wait a second, we didn't have rifles like that 150 years ago. That's true. But that doesn't mean long-range hunting hasn't been around. In fact, long-range hunting really started around 1874 with the Sharps buffalo rifle. Now, there was a massive thing where they went after bison and killed, almost took them extinct. I think it was 36 million and some change bison, and by the end of it there was about 85 left before it was stopped. So there was a lot of bison killed. There's estimates of up to 5,000 a day on average for some of these guys, and they used a variety of different weapons. Now, the Sharps buffalo rifle actually predates that and is actually older. The difference is in 1874 we had metallic cartridges, we had actual cartridges, and we had the long range Sharps buffalo rifle. Now, this is a longer barreled Sharps, and here's the thing. It was built specifically, here we go, for long-range hunting of bison. It was not abnormal for them to take these guns and kill bison at 800 to 1,000 yards. That was actually a pretty common thing, and that's documented. That's not theory. That is something that actually came of this. And it was one of the first guns designed specifically for long range. And if we look at what a long-range gun is, a long-range precision gun, we have a heavy barrel. We want consistency, so we want to have a good barrel. They both had good barrels. We need a type of long-range sighting system. Well, with the Sharps, we actually had a couple different ones. One, you have the iron sights, and actually Barrett's have something like this, where it's a ladder-style sight where you're going to adjust up, and you can adjust for both windage and elevation on some of these. And it goes out in different increments. On the Barrett, like the M107 Alpha 1, it goes to about 2,000 yards. The different ones on the Sharps is going to depend on what you have, but it actually has that, so you can adjust it, just like adjusting a scope out to distance. So we have long, heavy barrels, really well-built guns, and here's the thing, really consistent. Now, accuracy is consistency, and consistency is key to long range. Now, with a bolt action gun like this, when you close the bolt, that's it. There's no moving parts. The only thing that's moving is that trigger and that firing pin. So what's happening with that is there is no movement, so it's very consistent, whereas a semi-auto has more movement going on, so it's going to be less consistent. So that's why bolt guns are so much more consistent and accurate. Now, with the Sharps, it had a falling block design. So when you move the lever open, that block drops down, you place your cartridge, and when you lock it up, that block locks in place and doesn't move, just like a bolt closing. So it was extremely consistent and accurate. Now the other type was actual optics. After a few years, they actually started putting optics on these, and then they could go out further and with more accuracy than doing the iron sights. But these guns were specifically designed in 1874 as a long-range hunting rifle. Now, that predates, oh, my grandpa hunted this way, back in the 1940s, the 1950s, and that's traditional hunting, and long range goes against that. Well, guess what? Long range hunting has been around for longer than anybody on this planet has been alive. So at the exact same time, and even before of when they're claiming is traditional hunting and long range doesn't belong, long range actually existed. And here's the thing, it was different. A lot of these guys trying to paint, long range as, oh, you guys just don't have the skills to get up close. Not realizing that most long range hunters are archery hunters. We do up close, we do long range, we're just more rounded. It's not, we're shooting that far just to shoot or because we can't do something. It's just another method, which is funny because these guys always contradict themselves and are hypocrites. And it's really funny because they'll say that, oh, it's super easy. Anybody can just go shoot long range and shoot an animal, but you have to have skill to stalk. And then these guys will turn around and say, hey, nobody should do long range because it's super hard and nobody can do it. Well, they just said it was easy. Now they're saying it's super hard. So they just bounce back and forth. Again, it has nothing to do with facts with them, but that's what I like, is actual facts. And the facts are, for 150 years, we've had long range hunting. And back then, it was actually viewed as a good thing. Why? Because those guys were able to make those long shots. They were skilled enough to do that. And people looked at them in a positive light. Actually, the term sharpshooter, if you ever get called sharpshooter, it means you're a really good shot. It comes from the Sharps buffalo rifle and these guys. They were called sharp shooters because they were using sharps and because the accuracy they could actually achieve. So it's the first rifle known to be specifically designed for long-range hunting, and it worked extremely well. In fact, there's actually competitions to this day based off that type of hunting, and it replicates what they were doing, and we'll touch on that in a second. But these things had long, big cartridges. They could go for a long way, and it was really, really effective at those long ranges. These were made famous by the movie Quigley Down Under, which was a Shiloh Sharps out of Montana. If I remember right, it was a 45-110, but that movie made it absolutely famous. Now, were they all shooting, offhand like that? No, most are shooting off shooting sticks, stuff like that, but long range was done back then. And ironically, the load development was interesting because it was one of those guns that you had to build an accurate load. If you're dealing with muzzle loaders and stuff like that up close, or if you're dealing with pistols or regular cartridges, you don't need to stretch out, so you don't need that type of accuracy. But with the Sharps, just like with this, when I go to do load development with something like this, with one of my bolt guns, I'm going to mess with the powders to make sure it's good. I'm going to, trim it to a certain length. I'm going to change seating depths to make sure it's good. And that's actually stuff they did with the Sharps buffalo rifles. They would tune them from, how far off the lands to everything to make them the most accurate possible. So it was really kind of the start of the modern load development as well. Now, you guys are going to get a little treat. You're going to get a little insight into my life and kind of how I got started in the entire long-range thing. Now, I mentioned that there are long-range competitions to this day, and they still go on. Here's one that goes on. I think it's in California, if I remember right. Don't quote me on that, but they actually have one, and it's, a Quigley match, but you can see from these pictures they still shoot the traditional way. But I actually got to have a trip to Shiloh Sharps. Now, the history with Shiloh Sharps, Sharps Buffalo rifles actually stopped production in 1881. And so they completely stopped. The modern Sharps that you see was actually started by Shiloh Sharps. It was a guy, Lynn, and his partner, Wolfgang, that did that. They started in New York and then moved to Big Timber, Montana. And they are the reason why we have the modern Sharps and all the different companies make them. It was done in 1983. So we had just over 100 years without any production of them. So there was the originals, and then Shiloh Sharp stepped in and started making them. Now, some history with that. My grandpa shot competitively with long-range Sharps on these competitions for 19 years. Here he is in his competition days. Now, that's actually what got me started. When I was a little kid, when he was doing these, he picked me up and actually took me on a road trip to Big Timber, Montana. He was long friends with Wolfgang, one of the original founders. He shot their rifles, had a big association with them. And so I was able to go with him, and I got to tour the factory. I think I was about 8 or so, 8 or 9, and I got to go through the entire factory. I got to watch them build rifles. They cut all their own barrels and do everything in-house. They are the top dogs when it comes to Sharps. So it was really cool. I got to go around there. I got to see everything we built. I got to actually see the Quigley rifle. It was super cool. For those who are into the Western stuff, Mike Venetrino is a Western author. He used to write a bunch of articles. I think he still does. But he's a longtime friend of my grandpa also, and shot competition, etc. with him. But he was actually there picking something up. And so we got talking, and he asked me, hey, do you like guns? Of course I love guns. And so he leans over, says to the receptionist, says, hey, I'm going to replace these, pulls 2 of his books off, autographs them to me, and gives them to me. Now, the funny part is my grandpa was pretty ticked off because they're long friends. They've been friends for a long time, and he had to pay for them and didn't get them autographed. So that was super cool. I still have those books. Great memory. But it didn't even stop there. It got even more cool for me as a little kid. Now, after that, I had that cool tour. We ended up meeting Wolfgang, one of the original founders, for dinner with him and his wife. Really, really nice guy. And then afterwards, we went to his house. And he wanted to show me something cool. So he took me down in the basement, and he had this huge buffalo hide from one he shot with his rifles. Now, I started noticing stuff, and I was looking around at pictures, and there was actually a picture on his wall of him in the Oval Office giving one of his rifles to Ronald Reagan as president. And I was looking at that, and then I noticed to the right, there was a poster, and it had all these different Sharps cartridges on there. And he walked up to me and said, is that pretty cool? And I said, yeah. And he pulled it off the wall and gave it to me. And I still have that poster today. Now, I don't display it anymore just because it's old. I don't want it falling apart. Eventually, I'll end up framing it. But it was really cool, and he ended up passing, a little while after that. He was pretty old at the time. Super nice guy. But it was a huge eye-opening experience and made me fall in love with long range. Now, I went the opposite of my grandpa. My grandpa went with that side. I went with modern rifles, but it's still long range. We still like to talk, and I got some really cool insights into that. But he shot all over. His first one was in Virginia City. They shot out to 1,200 yards with iron sights. Absolute blast. But here's the thing. Those guys did load development too. Just like I talked about earlier. They wanted to tweak seating depths. They need to find the right powder mixture. Some would actually mix smokeless and black powder to get the mixture correct. There was a bunch of different stuff they did. He shot a 45-70 in one Sharps, and his other 1874 Sharps was a 45-90. It had a 32-inch barrel shooting a 500 grain bullet. One of his favorite matches, though, was in Montana, he told me about, and they would do a little side match afterwards where they would set a coffee can with dynamite in it, and everybody would shoot and try to hit it and see who could blow it up. So they had a lot of fun with these things. He did that for 19 years. He shot other competition too, but for this he did it for 19 years. It really got me interested in long range, and that's kind of just how I got started at, loving long range as a kid. Now, I don't currently have one. Eventually, I am going to order one and get my own Sharps. I would love to do that. I'd love to go on a bison hunt with that. I have killed a bison before, actually with this gun. But I'd like to do it with a Sharps Buffalo rifle. That would be so cool for me. I would want to go with the original iron sight setup versus the scope, though. I mean, the scope's kind of cool, but if you're doing a Sharps, do a Sharps. So it's a pretty neat thing. But they shot actual steel targets that were shaped like buffalo. They weren't life-size, but that's what they shot. And all these competitions were based on replicating what those buffalo hunters did, how they shot off shooting sticks, all that. Everything had to be period and how it was done. And so it's pretty crazy what you can accomplish with that, both back then and now. In fact, the longest kill back in the day in the 1800s with an 1874 was on an Indian. There was an attack. It was like 700 Indians trying to take a fort or something. And one of the army guys with an 1874 Sharp took an Indian off his horse at 1,538 yards. And after everything was done, the army actually measured it out, his entire shot. The funny part, in mentioning Shiloh Sharps and Mike Venetrino, there's a bunch of people that tried to question that and say that it was bogus, it couldn't be done. And so Shiloh Sharps and Mike Venetrino, the author that gave me the books, they went down to, I believe it was New Mexico, and they replicated that shot. And not only were they able to do it, and it was only 5 degrees of barrel tilt in order to do it, they also were able to shoot and see the maximum effective range of how far that bullet will go. And I don't remember what the angle was, 40, 50 degrees, something like that. But the bullet traveled a total of 3,600 yards. And these things don't have a high muzzle velocity. They were going, 1,000 to 1,200 feet per second, if I remember right, depending on what you had. But they can go a long ways. And they, with those bullets, were able to kill a long ways away. But in competition, the furthest he ever shot was 1,200. But they replicated them on, bison steel targets. They did a bunch of fun stuff. Really crazy. But let's start moving forward now with other guns and the history of long range. Now, I've shown you guys that long range hunting has been around for a long time. And long range shooting hunting has been around since then. It's just not as well known. And why is that? Well, the same with everything else. The internet. The amount of information that is available. I mean, there's stuff that back in the day could be happening, 30 miles away, and you would never know unless somebody told you or you were connected. And so long range hunting has been going on this whole time. But it's just not widely known that it was. Even if you look at long range competitions, they were doing iron sights with military rifles at 1,000 yards. I'm not talking some custom built, sniper rifle. They were using the same stuff that they were using in the service and shooting. So even long range competition out to 1,000 yards has been going on even since, after the Buffalo rifles. It just continued and using different guns. If you look at the Mosin Nagant versus the Mosin Nagant sniper rifle, it's a modified version to take a scope, but it's the same rifle. It's really the marksman. And so even back then, they were achieving long range kills in combat with just the regular rifle everybody else is using, basically. And it wasn't special. So could you make those shots back then? Absolutely, hunting. And guys did, but again, it wasn't widely known. If we skip forward to the Vietnam era, the 60s and 70s, if we look at the Marine Corps M40, now, this was kind of the switch over as far as, going with these guns of more specialized. And what they did is they took a Remington 700 hunting rifle and accurized it. It's still got a 3x9 duplex reticle scope, cap turrets, and it's what most beginning hunters, like I started hunting with a 3x9 when I got my first scope. Same kind of concept as what they were using. So they're not using the same crazy stuff that we're using today with the equipment. They were using basically accurized hunting rifles that had been worked over a little bit, and they were able to achieve great accuracy. In fact, here's Steve Suttles, who was one of my instructors and mentors. In Vietnam, they had to qualify every week at 1,200 yards from Hill 55. With that rifle, he made the longest confirmed kill with a 308 until 2005 at 1,250 yards with that rifle. So it's one of those things that people say, oh, that's a sniper rifle. The regular guy couldn't get that. Absolutely wrong. You could absolutely take your 700 rifle into a gunsmith and have them accurize it. The same option was available to the civilian. There was no difference. It was basically a hunting rifle that they messed with a little bit and got better ammo for. And so even then, you can still do it. And the thing is, long range has always been there. The Western hunts, Western lands, that's long range no matter what. And it's done with the same type of rifles. The same thing as that M40 is what a lot of guys consider a traditional hunting rifle and hunt with today. And in fact, the weapons today, the rifles, even the factory ones, are far more accurate than they were back then. Now, as we move forward, I've talked about the industry. Oh, the industry is just pushing it. That's not how it works. You can have the supply of whatever you want. You can create whatever product you want. But if there's not a demand for it, if people don't want it, guess what? You're out of luck. The industry is actually reacting to us as long range. As long range becomes more popular and we're pushing for better bullets, better guns, etc., it's pushing the industry into that. Now, guys just try to say the industry is doing it as a way to just discredit it as, oh, the industry is trying to do this to make sales. That's not true. Not remotely true. In fact, they've moved really slow. The last little bit has been a major fast forward, which is great, but it took way too long to really push them to do what, we're at today. So it's not something that just happened overnight. From the type of stocks and chassis we use, and I hear guys all the time trying to trash that also, but it's one of those things, those advancements came for a reason. If we take like this, which has an adjustable stock, versus one that doesn't, the traditional hunting rifle, but the traditional style stock, we actually had to modify it. If it was too long, we have to cut it shorter. If it wasn't long enough, we would have to add something for a recoil pad or something to extend that to make it perfect to fit us. As far as the cheek weld used, foam, duct tape, etc., to get that cheek weld higher to actually fit you properly. So you'd have to modify it. And after so long of us doing that, whether it's military snipers, long-range hunters, etc., the industry started making adjustable cheek pieces and adjustable length of pull. And it's been driven by our needs, not what the industry wants. And so we're getting better products every day, and we're getting better equipment, we're getting better stuff. It's great. It's what you want. You want progress. That's what you want. But we're not sacrificing anything because it's been around the whole time. It's just like, you're not making a little bow and arrow out in the woods and then going and shooting an animal. No, you're using your compound bow, you're using your crossbow, you're using your modern longbow or whatever it is. You're using better equipment than what they used back in the day, which helps us get more ethical kills, makes us more accurate. So it's really a great thing. So long range has been going on this whole time, but what's changed is the availability of information. And now that people are wanting to do that, now it's becoming more popular because people are seeing what can actually be done. Now we have more training facilities opening up. It used to not be that way. You didn't have a whole lot of places to train. Badlands is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, training facility of its type, and they started in 1999, if I believe. And that was kind of the shift that moved forward of other companies doing that for both the civilian, military, law enforcement market, where you could get training across the board for that. Now, we have more available training today. We have better equipment. There's more to it. And even some companies that specialize in long-range hunting are even offering schools to teach you. I know Gunworks has it, Best of the West, Hunting or Precision Hunting Supply, formerly Best of the West Arizona. I know all of them offer classes to teach you how to hunt long range with their equipment specifically. So, training is being pushed. It's not, get any guy, give him a rifle and just have him shoot 1,000 yards at animals. That's not happening. And that's ridiculous. And none of them are promoting that either. That's a common misconception. It's just lies spread. But, we're all about training stuff, but that's what the shift is coming from. We have bigger competitions now. Everybody knows PRS, everybody knows F-class, all this. But, a lot of that stuff's been around. Bench has been around for a long time. Long-range competitions have been around a long time. But it didn't have the popularity. PRS was a huge shift because it's not bench shooting. You're not, getting some really expensive setup and having to do low development and, doing all that stuff that you have to do. PRS and, long-range hunting type competitions are the same things you're going to do in the field, and you can benefit from them short range or long range. So to address that, I hear all the time, guys are just, grabbing a gun and they're going to go shoot an elk at 1,000 yards. People always go to that 1,000-yard mark because that's what, a sniper has qualified out to 1,000 yards. A lot of these competitions for long range is 1,000 yards. It's kind of a benchmark of shooting that. Now, Here's the thing. That doesn't mean the long-range hunter is. Now, long-range hunting in the West has always been there. Open country, mountains, etc. People are doing it even without training, and they're being successful at it. I know tons of people that without any precision training, I know because I've trained some of these guys after the fact, they were killing elk and deer and stuff at 400 or 500 yards with their hunting rifles with minimal training whatsoever. So it's not actually as hard as you think. Now, are there a lot of terrible hunters out there? Absolutely. There's a lot of terrible shots. I hate to say it, but it's true. And could they benefit from better training, better equipment? Absolutely. And this is the type of stuff that can do it. You don't have to, hunt long range if you learn how to shoot it, but it will teach you how to shoot better, even at short range. And so, the whole 1,000-yard thing or extended range that I've been hearing lately is bogus. The average long-range hunter, 90% of them is going to be inside 600 yards. Most are just trying to get better equipment, better bullets, and be a better shot within their comfort zone. And they're not out there trying to just smack stuff at super long range. Do we have a few of those jackasses? Absolutely. But every group has their bad apples. Every group has the guys that you're just like, dear God, they're not with us. So to label everybody as one and then spread, rumors that we're out there wounding animals all the time and blah, 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 it's all unfounded. There's no data to support it. And the claims that long range goes against hunting tradition or skill sets or blah, blah, it's bogus. It predates what they're saying as traditional. It's been around the whole time. The difference is it's available information and more people are getting into it. More and more people are learning that long range isn't as hard as people think. It's really not. You'd be amazed at what you can do with proper instruction and the proper equipment. Long range hunting is here to stay. It's nothing new. No, the industry's not pushing it. We're not out there, just running around handing people guns and saying shoot 1,000 yards at an animal. None of that's happening. So a word of advice, if you're going to get information about long-range hunting, get it from an actual long-range hunter, not from some guy on the internet or an anti-long-range guy. I mean, that's like asking a PETA person about hunting. That person from PETA is going to lie to you. They're going to give you a bunch of false information and try to make it look bad. And then that person turns around and says whatever PETA said without actually verifying or knowing anything about it. That's what we're dealing with, but it's hunter on hunter. So if you're going to ask questions, if you're really curious about long range, ask a long range hunter. Don't go to the guy that doesn't know what he's talking about and doesn't even do it. So, if you guys have questions about long range or anything like that, drop them in the comments. I'm very active in the comments. I try to help people whenever I can, educate, move forward. And even if you don't want to do long range hunting, you just want to better yourself, you want to better your equipment, whatever, you can still do that. This still applies. Fundamentals are fundamentals regardless of the distance. That's something people don't understand. I was just talking to somebody that I taught years ago, and he took, some buddies out and they were shooting soda cans at 600 yards like it was nothing. And he told me something that I preach all the time. The only difference is how much you dial or how much you hold. It doesn't matter if you're at 600 yards or 1,200 yards or at 100 yards. Everything's the exact same. You're mounting the gun the same, your fundamentals of marksmanship are the same, your trigger control, everything, your breathing is the exact same thing. The only difference is how much you dial or how much you hold. It's really not hard. As long as you're doing everything good and your data is solid, you're going to hit. It's really not as difficult as people make it out, but if somebody doesn't know, they're going to think that's legit, that it's super hard, and it's not. You'd be amazed what you can do with the right equipment. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope it's educational for you, a little breakdown of the history, not only of me a little bit, but the history of long-range hunting. And it definitely is not a new fad and goes against, anything. It's here to stay. It's been here this, a whole time. I hear guys all the time say, oh, well, it's going to ruin hunting. This new fad's going to ruin. No, it's not. It's been around for 150 years and it hasn't ruined it. There's nothing wrong with it. What does ruin it is guys spreading lies, rumors, and misinformation because they don't like something. That is what's ruining hunting. Not long range, not trapping, not any other type of hunting that somebody takes offense to or something. It's the guys who take offense to it and then spread lies about it and try to harm other people's ability to do something, trying to take away from them because they are so self-centered that they think the world revolves around them, unfortunately. And that's a very common thing. To leave it with a quote from Louis L'Amour, one of my favorite Western authors, he said it perfectly, that when people get comfortable, when they get settled in cities, when they don't have any real problems, they tend to invent problems. Because the guy out on the plains back in the Western days who was worried that, oh, if I don't eat, if I don't find my game and shoot it, then I might starve to death, my family might starve to death. That guy's not complaining about, oh, you shot an animal, but it was 100 yards further than you should have. Now I'm not going to eat it and I'm going to starve to death. No, they're going to be like, hey, that's great. You're a great shot. Maybe you should hunt from now on. But when people get to a city, and the more populated, the more comfortable, they have cops to take care of them, they don't have to worry about where their next meal's coming from. People get too comfortable and they start inventing problems. They want drama. And that's kind of what this is, hunting has changed in the fact that it's not a necessity. If you want to eat just wild game like I try to do, great. But there's other ways to get food, whereas back then it was your food source. And so people get comfortable. Now they like to nitpick and complain and go after others. They want to, be keyboard warriors on the internet and, attack other people and troll. It's just people that don't have any real problems trying to mess with other people. So, don't pay attention to those guys. If you want to learn long range, or even if you don't want to do it and you just want to check it out and get some actual information, some factual information so you have an educated opinion, talk to a real long range hunter, a credible one. That's key, a credible long-range hunter. So, everybody, you guys be safe out there. Thanks for tuning in. Again, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Everybody be safe out there. Happy hunting.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notification bell so you won't miss out on any future video. And happy hunting!